The bruising battle in the White House between the President and the House Speaker is over. I suspect not for long, though. Donald Trump and Congress now have 3 weeks to sort out differences on the funding of the Mexican border wall. And that's according to a deal reached to end the 35-day government shutdown. It's believed to have seriously damaged the President's political standing. Let's go live now to our Washington correspondent, Simon Marks. Simon, what happens now?
Well, 3 weeks of negotiations by Republicans and Democrats up on Capitol Hill. I mean, we're back at square one after a 35-day government shutdown. The president insisted he wouldn't end unless he was given $5.7 billion to build that wall along the U.S. border with Mexico. In the event, he ended it without getting a single dollar from the United States Congress to build the wall. And he ended it because Republicans up on Capitol Hill started getting scared. They could see that the president and the Republican Party were being blamed in the polls for the shutdown. The stories of hardship by federal government workers laid off temporarily were spreading, and so the Republican support for President Trump essentially evaporated. Now, he says, he'll shut the government down again in 3 weeks' time if he doesn't get $5.7 billion to build the wall. It's not immediately clear why Democrats would give him that money, given the polling data shows that the president's being blamed for the initial shutdown. He does, however, Jane, have another option, which is to declare a national emergency and try and divert money towards construction of the wall. He says he would then be able to build the wall without congressional approval. So that may be where he's heading.
I mean, yes, you wonder why he's taking this chance on his popularity with, elections coming in the near future. What's he going to do now in order to regain his popularity? Because clearly this is not working in his favour.
Well, he's got a massive task. I mean, there's no question about that. He's lost 8 points in the polls over the last 3 months. At one stage during the government shutdown, he was hemorrhaging support to the tune of 0.2% in the polls every single day. He fervently believes, and his supporters at the White House fervently believe, that they're on the right side of the argument when it comes to illegal immigration, and that it will be a huge issue in the 2020 presidential election that gets his vote out. But the Democrats are absolutely convinced that the president has not succeeded in making the case that this is indeed the humanitarian and security crisis that he maintains. And they think that the voters are going to vote on other issues, particularly those pertaining to the parlous nature of America's healthcare system, the economy, which is not quite as buoyant now as it was just a couple of months ago. So these are the battle lines that are being drawn for 2020.
And what about Roger Stone, indicted by Mueller and arrested by the FBI? I believe he's going to be in court again tomorrow. What are you hearing about that?
Yes, he's going to be in court again. He's also going to be on television again here tonight. The most dangerous place in America seems to be between Roger Stone and a live television studio. He's ubiquitous on the cable channels, insisting that he's not going to rat President Trump out. He's not going to cooperate with prosecutors. He intends to plead innocent to all the charges that he faces. He says they are serious charges: obstruction, lying to Congress, and witness tampering. And there is still the possibility that Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor, has held some possible conspiracy charges back. Indeed, it's important to understand that that dawn arrest of Roger Stone last week was not just a dramatic piece of political theatre by the FBI. It was an evidence-gathering raid at his home in Fort Lauderdale, also at a residence he has in New York City. So it may well be that prosecutors are gathering more information to bring more charges against him. All of it deepens the problem that Donald Trump faces, because the special prosecutor Robert Mueller is slowly connecting the dots between Donald Trump at one end of the equation, the Russians at the other end, with Roger Stone and Julian Assange of WikiLeaks in the middle.
It should make for good viewing. Simon Marks, thank you very much. There are fears that the bombing at a Roman Catholic church on Sunday will lead to further repression in the Philippines. President Rodrigo Duterte's government is already accused of human rights abuses because of his tough stance in the fight against drugs. At least 12,000 people, men, women and children, have died in his targeted killings. Tonight we speak to Sean Shelley, Deputy Secretary of the United Nations Vienna NGO Committee on Drugs, who's joining us from our Cape Town studio. Good to see you again, Sean Kelly. Is this a good idea, what Duterte is doing? Is it something that we should look at here in South Africa? Because it seems to be working.
Well, that depends what working is. In my opinion, it's not working at all. All it's doing is terrifying a nation, polarizing a nation. And if we have a look at it, it's not simply about drugs. For Duterte, it's also about wiping out political enemies. So when he tried to reintroduce the death penalty, or he's trying to reintroduce the death penalty for drug offences, if you look at the second line of that, it also includes political insurrection. And really what he's trying to do is drum up populist support, and there is a lot of support for him in the Philippines, and certainly wipe out any political opposition and show how tough he is at the same time. But no, that it cannot possibly work in South Africa. It cannot work anywhere, because the more you oppress people, the more that they're going to find meaning in drugs, the more that they're going to find themselves in impoverished circumstances. And really, it's a form of, I suppose, colonialism in a way, or subjugation of people by their own people, you know. So it's ridiculous even to think that it would work here. Donald Trump seems a big fan of Duterte, and I'm not surprised at that, because I think they're of a similar ilk. You know, they come out of the same mold, and both of them are just intent on one thing, and that's just ensuring their own power.
And I guess when somebody of that stature gives the go-ahead to take this sort of action, that people will take it on themselves to attract somebody that they think, to attack rather, somebody they think is a drug dealer.
Absolutely. We did a sort of a study a couple of years ago where we looked at the areas where there was the most sort of human rights abuses against people who use drugs accessing medical services in South Africa. And we tended to find, and this is not a robust study, but there was a sort of a correlation with political leads that demanded that people crack down on drugs and human rights violations. And certainly that's what we're seeing in the Philippines. You know, there's this tacit approval by government that it's okay to kill people who use drugs. And certainly that narrative is enforced or reinforced by Trump in many ways. And we're seeing escalations around the world, including in South Africa. We're seeing increased violence against people who use drugs. And we must remember that these people are somebody else's children, and, you know, mothers and fathers and that. And if we look at the photos from the Philippines, they're absolutely tragic and shocking. They're enough to really move the heart of the coldest heart. You know, it's terrible what's going on there. We're seeing people being shot down in the streets. The security forces are killing people and mummifying their bodies and putting them on display for people as a deterrent, and we know this doesn't work. There's 40 years of research that says that these kinds of things do not work whatsoever as deterrents.
All right. He's also considering changing the law to target children as young as 9. What is your response to that? I mean, should the age be lowered when it comes to something like this?
Not at all. Look, in my opinion, nothing good comes from putting people in jail for drugs, let alone for, you know, to kill them. We know that if you arrest somebody who's young for a drug-related offence, they are sort of 7 to 8 times more likely to be involved in a violent offence, independent of any other factors, in their 40s. We know as well that as soon as you isolate somebody who uses drugs, the meaning or salience of the drug becomes more important, and they're more likely to use drugs. We also remove economic possibilities for them, and they end up being recruited for the gangs. So if you want to recruit more gangs, if you want instability, target young people who are using drugs and put them in jail. Now, the move to incarcerate 9-year-olds or to charge 9-year-olds with full criminal culpability as young as 9 is actually also a move against the parents, because you're now terrifying parents that their kids are going to end up in jail. The fact is, drug dealers are still going to use kids to run for money, run drugs for them, because there's money involved in it, and there are very few economic opportunities. You can pay kids very little, and the chance of them getting caught or charged is much less. But that's not going to stop drug dealers from doing that.
Okay, so what is the solution if Duterte's brutality is not working? We are losing, I know there have been quite dramatic strides here in South Africa, but we're losing the war on drugs too. So what should be done?
Well, first of all, the first no-brainer move is actually to decriminalize the use and possession of drugs. Because what you do by that is you immediately free up resources to concentrate on true crimes and other issues. And that money can be spent on social upliftment. We know that if we give more opportunity to people, we get less dependent drug use. It is going to be difficult because I understand, when somebody is busy stealing the copper pipes from your house, it's not a very pleasant thing. But if we were more inclusive of people who use drugs in decision-making processes, if we understood what the problems really were, and worked on prevention strategies much young, with children at a much younger age, and had a continuum of care, we would find a lot less problems.
So why aren't we doing
Introducing opioid
that?
substitution therapy, for example. I think there's a lack of political will, and also to target people who use drugs and blame them for the problems is a politically expedient excuse for not delivering in other areas. And also, it's difficult to say this is what we're going to do to improve the conditions of people and actually live up to that in a short, 5-year period or whatever. But to say we're going to be hard on drugs and target something and police something that can't be policed and actually can't be reduced that way is something that people want to hear. They want to hear that you're going to get tough on drugs. So really what we must do is identify what the real issues were, because if drugs weren't in our communities, we would still have those issues.
And of course the money makes it worthwhile for them, doesn't it? Sean Shelley, always good to talk to you. Thank you. Up next, at least 30 million people are starving in Mali and Niger. The region is also heating up faster than the rest of the world. We speak to the Red Cross about what they saw there. And then racism in cricket, the fallout from the incident between Pakistan and the Proteas.